So now coming to our guideline that we have for today, of malaria in pregnancy 54A is 2010. So malaria, it's a life-threatening condition, but however, so now a malaria, it's preventable, however, but a life-threatening condition. Malaria is caused by the bite of female Anopheles mosquito, which usually infects the red blood cells. Now there are four species of malaria, that is Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale, and Plasmodium malari. So the most common and the most dangerous is Plasmodium falciparum. However, the least common are Plasmodium ovale and malari. And usually Plasmodium falciparum, it is found in countries like Africa, West Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana. However, Plasmodium vivax is more common when people are traveling to Asia. And the unique type and the relapsing, most of the relapsing of the virus can be either with vivax or well as well, or malaria itself. They all can be have relapsing, but the unique feature that is for Plasmodium malari is that it can present even after many years as well. So in order to prevent from happening malaria, we need to take certain precautions in the form of chemoprophylaxis among people who are residing in the UK and who present with malaria in the UK is low. So special efforts are being taken to treat malaria prevention messages to migrant groups to reduce the risk of travel associated malaria significantly. Now, what are the complications of malaria in pregnancy? Malaria will affect the mother as well as the baby. So in terms of complications, it can be either pregnancy loss in having miscarriages, or even if it is very severe enough, it can cause maternal mortalities. And in terms of baby or fetus, it can cause reduced birth weight in the fetus in the form of a small for gestational age and stillbirth and premature labor. These are few of the adverse effects or the complications of malaria in pregnancy. That is why it is very important to identify malaria in pregnancy and treat it as well. Hello?
If someone is using the washroom, how can you go over there?
So the clinical manifestations in pregnancy depends on the premonition. That is what by the word premonition we mean. That is the natural our body has an host immunity that we call against malaria. That is we call as premonition. Now premonition, it depends on the repeated exposure to infectious Anopheles mosquito bite. So UK based residents, they usually have low or no premonition because the infection, the Anopheles mosquito is very rare in UK. That is why the people who are residing in UK, they have low premonition, or that means that immunity, their level of immunity is low. So now in terms of, we talk about in terms of prevention of malaria infection in pregnancy. So what advice should be given to pregnant women if they are considering travels to a malaria endemic area? So pregnant women who are considering the travel, risk of travel to malaria endemic areas, countries and considerably postponing their trip unless the travel is unavoidable. So the first that we talk is they should postpone their trip unless it cannot be avoided. Now, what are the consequences of malaria in pregnancy in non-immune female UK-based residents? So these are basically the consequences that we will be discussing ahead as well. The woman can have infections, their risk of having anemia, severe malaria, along with that maternal and fetal mortality. And for the baby, there can be risk of miscarriages, preterm birth, small for gestational age, and stillbirth as well. So we need to understand that the severity, if people are not immune, then the infection, all the most common things that can happen is there is a high risk of having miscarriage, premature birth, and stillbirth. But however, if the woman is having a bit of immunity that is high premonition level, then she is prone to have, she is at risk of having severe anemia. And along with that, the placenta, that is the afterbirth, can also be affected because of this malaria. So now, if the woman says ideally trip should be postponed in malaria endemic countries, but if it is not avoidable, then how should we go ahead with the management further? So advise the woman to seek guidance from a center with expertise on malaria risk and avoidance strategies. Avoiding advise women that the fever or flu-like illness while traveling or upon returning home up to 1 year or more may indicate malaria and requires medical attention. So it could be either mild flu or flu-like symptoms. However, the symptoms may last for up to 1 year or even more than that. So advise the woman on the risk of being exposed to malaria at her intended area of travel. So basically there are no specific measures to be taken in pregnancy that can be taken to prevent malaria beyond those who are non-pregnant women. So in terms of prevention of malaria, we have ABCD, that is the awareness of the risk, bite prevention in terms of chemoprophylaxis, and the diagnosis and the treatment, which must be prompt. So now we are going to talk about each one of them one by one. So what needs to be done to raise the pregnant travelers' awareness for the risk of malaria? So risk of malaria is dependent on several factors that we should know. The area the woman is traveling, whether the level of transmission in that area we should be knowing, the time of the year, whether she is going in a rainy or a dry season, and whether her stay, the length of the stay, how long she is going to stay, and the availability we should also be knowing, and any presence of drug-resistant strains of Plasmodium falciparum or vivax, whether it's a rural area or an urban country, are planned over. And sometimes the likelihood of uptake of malaria prevention intervention is also very important. So they've given a very good example, the guideline that I would like to share with all of you. For example, if a woman proposes to go to urban tourist areas of Southeast Asia, that is Bangkok or Phuket, and she stays in air-conditioned hotel, the risk is considered minimal for malaria. But if she travels to Sub-Saharan Africa and China, that constitute a significant risk of infection. So countries like Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, the high risk areas where if a woman travels, our first thought should go directly to the infection malaria. By reading, if a question comes, because I'll be solving the questions ahead with you, and you will realize that only the area mentioned, the country names are mentioned, and you will just have to get the point from there and pick the best answer. So if we con- so risk of contracting malaria during a 1 month stay without chemoprophylaxis. If a woman is not taking any prophylaxis in terms of, we are going to discuss ahead with it. So the least risk is in, so the least risk is in terms of Oceania, that is includes countries like Popia, Solomon is Isin, and Vanuatu, that is the risk is 1 in 20. However, the highest risk is in Central Arabia, Central America, and the Caribbean. You need to remember the least and the highest point, because there was an SP in one of the question books. So it's really very important that we need to remember the least and the highest one. So now, how the mosquito bites should be prevented. In terms of prevention, inform the woman about the bite preventive measures, including skin repellents, knockdown mosquito sprays, insecticide treated bed nets, clothing, and the room protection. The Anopheles mosquito has different preferred timings in different parts of the world, but usually the risk period that is considered is from dawn to dusk will suffice. So the highest period in case of malaria, the risk is from dawn to dusk. But however, if it is a dengue infection, which is caused by a daytime biting mosquito, it should be prevented. So, in terms of that, in order to prevent malaria, dengue, because they are all caused by the bites of the mosquito, so we should use the preventive measures throughout the day, 24 hours of the day. However, so in terms of preventive measures, we have skin repellents. The repellents, they should favor the skin repellents. They should contain 50% of the DEET. If DEET is not available, we can either give PMG, Picardin 20%, or IR 3535. But if we are giving, if 50% of DET is not available, the alternatives, they are less effective and they will be requiring frequent application as well. So first of all, we had skin repellents. The other one that we are having is the knockdown mosquito sprays. The sprays that include, the sprays should contain pyrimethamine and also pyrethyroid. They will kill the resting and the flying mosquitoes, both of them. So pyrethyroid will kill the mosquitoes, and they are preferred ingredient in sprays, while pyrimethamine will repel and will also kill the mosquitoes when used regularly in the same room. So we need to understand this difference. A minor difference is there, but however, we need to understand this, that in terms, if it's a pyrethyroid, it will kill the mosquito, but if it's permethrin, it will repel, also kill the mosquitoes. And the other we are having is is the insecticide treated bed nets, which contains pyrethyroid. Impregnated bed nets offer significant protection. And along with that, definitely the clothes that we should be wearing, full sleeves should be wear. They should cover from till up to your ankles as well. They will cover the body, and they will also form as a barrier for protect from bite mosquitoes, will reduce the risk of malaria. And in terms of room protection, we have electrically heated beds, which will kill mosquitoes in the room. I will just repeat the prevention measures. In terms of prevention measures, we have a skin repellent. The one we have are the knockdown mosquito sprays that that should have, the sprays should be containing permethrin or pyrethyroid. The permethrin will be more suitable as compared to pyrethyroid, because permethrin has the property of repelling as well as killing the mosquitoes. However, the pyrethyroid will only kill the mosquitoes. And the third one is that we should use insecticide treated bed nets. Other one are the clothes and room protection in terms of using heated mat. Is everyone clear? Or shall I repeat any point for all of you?
Can you repeat your last sentence?
Sorry, pardon, can you repeat it again?
Yeah, the last sentence, difference between the pyrethroid and PMD.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll repeat it for you. No problem. These are the basically the mosquito sprays available. They usually have two ingredients in them, containing pyrethyroid and permethrin. The property of pyrethyroid is that it will quickly kill the mosquitoes, and the property of permethrin is that it will repel and kill the mosquitoes both. Hope I've repeated and cleared myself.
Yes.
Thank you so much for acknowledging. So now moving ahead from here. So which drug can be recommended for malaria prevention in pregnancy? So women should be informed, and their GP should be informed of the risk and the benefits of chemoprophylaxis versus the risk of malaria, reminding women that there is no malaria prophylaxis regimen that is 100% protective. None of the medications is 100% protective. But however, we need to understand what are the medications that are safe in pregnancy that can be used. The mode, either it can be given in the form of oral, IV, or IM, and in terms of breastfeeding, we should be knowing, and that I'll be discussing with you now.
Excuse
the
me, Dr.
choice of
Aksar. I want to ask one question.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, please.
I want to ask one question.
Sure. Go ahead.
It's about the previous slides in which you had told about this, the timing of the Anopheline mosquito.
Hmm.
And Anopheline mosquito, it bites during night. Am I right? Hello?
I'll go back to the guideline. I'll go back to the guideline.
Yeah, this slide, this one.
Yeah. Usually the
Anopheline.
guideline.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please go ahead. Sorry for interruption. Yeah.
No, I'm asking, Anopheline mosquito, it bites during night?
There is no evidence. The guideline, the what does the Royal College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, they say that it has different preferred biting times in different parts of the world. But making the assumption that the risk period is from dawn to dusk will suffice. Because we are studying the guidelines from UK, United Kingdom. So they're talking about the conditions that are happening in UK, not in our countries like Pakistan, India.
Okay.
These guidelines are based the evidence from the United Kingdom.
Because in Pakistan, in Asian countries, it usually it comes at night, no? After dusk.
Yeah, this is what that is why they very clearly written, mention it out that the Anopheles mosquito has different preferred biting times in different parts of the world, but making the assumption that the risk period is from dawn to dusk will suffice.
Okay. So I
Because
was
we are
confused.
studying, because we are giving the exam for the UK exam, so definitely they will be talking. We will be talking in United Kingdom countries that are here that we are, because we are giving their exam.
Okay.
Okay,
Right. Thank
that's
you.
just the
Thank you.
difference. Otherwise, yes, you're very right. If we talk in terms of our country, like Pakistan, India, definitely you're very right.
Thank you.
No worries. So now in terms of the choice of drug and advice about chemoprophylaxis in pregnant women, depending on the level of the chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium vivax malaria and, and the trimester of pregnancy. So the chemoprophylaxis from the malaria, it can be either in two forms, in the casual form or the suppressive form. In the later slides, we will be studying the full cycle of malaria just for the explanation to you. So the casual prophylaxis is directed against the liver Schizont stage, which take approximately 7 days to develop. So these drugs, for example, atoquinone, that is proguanil, need to be continued for 7 days after leaving a malarious area. But if we are using suppressive prophylaxis, that is mefloquinine, it is directed against the red blood cell stages of the malaria parasite, and it should be continued for 4 weeks after leaving a malarious area. So I would just quickly revise this point. The chemoprophylaxis for malaria is of two types, that is casual or suppressive. The casual will affect against the liver Schizont stage, and for this, the drug that is available is Malaron, which needs to be continued for 7 days after leaving that malaria area. But if it's a suppressive prophylaxis, that is mefloquinine, it affects the red blood cell stages and it should be continued for 4 weeks after leaving the malaria area. So it's very important. The word after and 4 weeks after. So chemoprophylaxis for women who are planning a pregnancy. Women who are planning pregnancy and traveling to a destination where there's a risk of contracting malaria should be advised. There may be harmful consequences for the pregnancy. Prophylaxis is never 100% effective, and malaria is associated with increased risk of not only for miscarriages, but with the complications that we've just previously read before in the previous slide. So the best option is that the woman should be advised not to travel or postpone their trip, or they can choose an alternative destination if possible. But if it is not possible either to delay the pregnancy or the traveling trip, advice from a specialist with the current experience of malaria should be sought. Now, chloroquine. and Proguanil, they are not efficacious in chloroquine-resistant areas and cannot be recommended because of this. So there are very few chloroquine-sensitive areas which are remaining. Avoid completely any potential adverse drug effects from preconception and the first trimester exposure. It is advisable to wait for complete excretion of the drug if it was taken for prophylaxis before becoming pregnant. So it is very important that we should wait for the complete excretion of the drug in the preconceptual period before woman is planning to get pregnant. Nevertheless, sometimes if unplanned conception happens, so the prophylaxis is not a reason for termination of the pregnancy, because this drug has a very low teratogenicity for the fetus. So that is why it should not be a reason for termination of pregnancy. Now, if the woman is breastfeeding or she is pregnant, so which are the drugs which are safe for in terms of chemoprophylaxis? It is mefloquinine. Mefloquinine is a suppressive chemoprophylaxis, which should be given at a dose of 5 mg per kg once a week. Is the drug of choice prophylaxis in the second and third trimester for chloroquine-resistant areas. With very few areas in the world from chloroquine-resistant malaria, mefloquine is essentially the only drug which is considered safe for prophylaxis in pregnant travelers. So it is very important that we understand the drug which is safe in pregnancy is mefloquinine in terms of prophylaxis. The majority of the observational and the clinical data, mostly in the second and third trimesters, suggest that the drug dose does not result in an increased risk of a stillbirth or congenital malformations at prophylactic doses. So this drug is considered safe, mefloquinine, in pregnancy and in breastfeeding women. So if the woman is using any kind of drug, so these are the different, it tells us about the different waiting times a woman should wait before she gets pregnant. So in terms of half-life of mefloquinine, it says it's 14 to 21 days, that is 2 to 3 weeks. In terms of doxycycline, it is almost 1 day. And in terms of Maleron or atovaquone, it's 2 to 3 days. And along with that, it also mentions the excretion time of the drug. That is for mefloquinine. The half-life is 2 to 3 weeks, but it will take around 3 months to excrete from our body. So pregnancy should be avoided for the period of excretion, till the period of excretion of the drug. And for doxycycline, it takes 1 week for the excretion. However, for Maleron or atovaquone, it takes 2 weeks. So we can remember it easy. 1 week is doxycycline. For Maleron and atovaquone, 2 weeks. And for 3, it's not weeks, it's month. That is mefloquinine. And for Proguanil, that is again also 1 week. So we can remember that is there are 2 drugs in terms of excretion. That is, one is doxycycline and the other one is Proguanil. That will take 1 week to be excreted from the body. And for chloroquine, there is no excretion time identified till now. So the use of mefloquinine is considered safe in second and third trimester, but the use of mefloquine in the first trimester may still be justified in areas of high risk acquiring falciparum malaria. In the UK, this can be discussed with a specialist with the current experience of managing malaria. However, there are some contraindications to mefloquinine drug that we should be all knowing. That is, if a woman is having any current or previous history of depression, any neuropsychiatric disorders, if she is epileptic, or if she is hypersensitivity to quinine or mefloquinine. To remember the contraindications, it is very easy that if just a very general contraindication to all of the drugs, irrespective whatever the drug is, the allergy or the hypersensitivity to any drug is a contraindication for that drug. And other than this, for this mefloquinine, we have depression, the neuropsychiatric disorder, and related to the neuropsychiatric disorder is epilepsy as well. So just we have 4 to be remembered. Now, in terms of prophylaxis, what are the drugs that can be given? We just need to remember whether the drug is chloroquine resistant or not. It's important. However, the dose is not important. That it has never come in the exam or any of the books that are available till now. So mefloquine, it is chloroquine resistant drug, and atovaquone, proguanil, it is also chloroquine resistant, and if mefloquine is not tolerated or contraindicated. Proguanil plus chloroquine, it can be used where there is no chloroquine resistant. So atovaquone and proguanil, that is Maleron. Maleron is combination, that is atovaquone.
ना करो, तंग ना करो, अपना पी लो कोल्ड ड्रिंक.
Atovaquone and proguanil, it is potentially a good candidate for prophylaxis in the 2nd and the 3rd trimester, but it is not recommended owing to insufficient data on its safety in pregnancy. So the safest drug is that we are considering is only mefloquine. If you are traveling to a chloroquine resistant area, it is essential in pregnancy and mefloquine cannot be tolerated or it is contraindicated, then atovaquone and proguanil use can be considered in consultation with a specialist who will be doing this. So the combination of atovaquone and proguanil, it becomes a drug that we call as Maleron. So ideally for chemoprophylaxis, the choice is mefloquine. If it is contraindicated or if cannot be tolerated by the patient due to any of the contraindications that we have just discussed before, so the next choice available will be Maleron. However, doxycycline, why is doxycycline contraindicated in pregnancy? Can anyone tell me? It's a very common drug that we have been using, especially in our gynae patients.
It affects the
discoloration of the teeth.
teeth.
Yes, exactly.
Discoloration
Very
of
good.
teeth.
It's a very common side effect for this drug, that doxycycline. It causes discoloration of the teeth. That is why it is contraindicated in pregnancy. And it also affects the bone growth of the fetus. And sometimes it can also cause congenital cataract as well. And the drug Primaquine is contraindicated because it causes hemolysis, particularly in the patients of G6PD deficiency. And how does it cause? It causes fetal blood cells. They are more sensitive to hemolysis, and the G6PD deficiency status of the fetus cannot be determined. So, ideally, the safe drugs in terms of chemoprophylaxis, the number 1 choice is mefloquine. If it is not available or is contraindicated or is not tolerated by the patients, then the second choice is Maleron. However, the Maleron should be given in consideration with the consultant specialist. While chloroquine and proguanil, they are safe, but they are no longer efficacious in areas of chloroquine resistance and provide women with suboptimal prophylaxis if needed. So recommendations for breastfeeding mothers are the same as for the pregnancy. So in pregnancy also, we can give mefloquine. Mefloquine is safe in breastfeeding as well as in breastfeeding. And along with that, atovaquone and proguanil, that is, may also be considered in consultation with an infectious disease physician for a pregnant woman who is traveling to mefloquine resistant area. Now, what are the emergency standby treatment we are having available that are in pregnancy? So first of all, the written instructions should be given to a pregnant traveler regarding the emergency standby malaria treatment in the event of suspected malaria, where there is no access to the medical care. Is my screen visible to all of you? Because I can see one of the messages by Dr. Saira, she's saying, all
Yes.
right, thank you, Dr. Surat, for acknowledging that. So much, Sarah. Thank you. So in terms of emergency treatment, The written instructions will be provided to a patient who is planning to travel, or who is planning for an emergency, or who's planning for a traveler to an endemic area where the malaria is high, prevalence of malaria is high. So malaria is considered as a medical emergency, and women should seek diagnosis and treatment at a health facility at the earliest opportunity. Early diagnosis and the standby emergency treatment have been promoted in the event of remote travel without access to medical care within 24 hours of the symptom. Now, when should we suspect malaria? It should be suspected if a woman is having flu-like illness and the temperature is 38 degrees centigrade or above. Medical treatment for a full medical evaluation, and in the event that she has fever, sometimes the fever could be from any other cause, so it must be sought at the earliest possibility. And for fever, we are going to give her antipyretics for women. The only recommended treatment that can be given in women in UK to pregnant women is we can only give to her quinine, that is 300 milligram, 2 tablets 3 times a day for days. Along with that, clindamycin should be given 150 milligram capsules, 3 capsules 3 times a day for 5 to 7 days. But it should be remembered that if a patient is taking clindamycin and she vomits within 30 minutes of that, so the full dose needs to be repeated, that is 150 milligram. But if she vomits after 30 to 60 minutes, the half dose should be repeated. This is very important point. This has come in one of the EMQs that patient was traveling. If patient wanted a treatment for a pregnant woman, but she has vomited after 30 to 60 minutes. All the options were given: 300 milligram, 150 milligram, 75 milligram, 200 milligram, all the options were there. So because after 30 to 60 minutes, so the dose should be half. That was a bit tricky question. So in terms, if you're talking in terms of chemoprophylaxis, I'll just give a quick revision of that. So if you're talking in terms of chemoprophylaxis, so in terms of chemoprophylaxis, the best choice will be methylquinine. And if the woman is pregnant, the treatment that we can give to her in pregnancy is quinine. That is safe. Along with that, clindamycin.
Can you make it full screen?
All right. Yes, please. Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So if the woman is pregnant and she is needing treatment, so the treatment of choice will be quinine. If quinine is not suitable for her, then the next choice will be coartem or Maleron if it is not used as a prophylaxis in cases of standby emergency treatment. Am I clear to all of you, or you want me to repeat or clarify any point for you before we move ahead with the next guideline? At this point, the treatment that we are giving to women, if the only recommended treatment is quinine, 300 milligram, 2 tablets, 3 times a day for 7 days. And for clindamycin, it is 150 milligram, 3 capsules, 3 times a day for 5 to 7 days. But if she vomits out within 30 minutes, then the full dose needs to be repeated. But if she vomits out after 30 to 60 minutes, the half dose needs to be repeated. And if the woman is having fever, in terms of fever, we are going to give her antipyretics should be given for the fever. Now, we are going to come to the next guideline for malaria. That is the diagnosis and treatment of malaria in pregnancy, which was released in April 2010. So before we discuss with this guideline, I have few percentages that are really very important. Have come in the questions or either in the recalls that I would like to tell you. First of all, in terms of mortality of malaria, it causes mortality by 0.5 to 1%. If it's an uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria which is causing mortality, so the incidence is 0.1%. But if it's a complicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria, the incidence of it is causing mortality in pregnant women is 50%. If the woman is non-pregnant, then the mortality risk is incidence is 15 to 20%. I'll repeat these percentages once again for you. These are only of the percentages that we need to mug up from these two guidelines. In terms of general mortality from malaria is 0.5 to 1%. If it's an uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria, so the incidence causing mortality is 0.1. If it's a complicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria, which is causing mortality in pregnant women, the incidence of mortality is 50%. However, if she's non-pregnant woman, the mortality incidence is 15 to 20%. So the Plasmodium, so it makes out that Plasmodium falciparum is the most common and the most dangerous species of malaria. Hope I have cleared. If you want, I can repeat it. Yes, I'll repeat it for you. Yes, please. The mortality from malaria, general malaria, any kind of a species, irrespective of the species, the rate of mortality is 0.5 to 1%. If it's an uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum, mortality incidence is 0.1%. If it's a complicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria, causing mortality in pregnant women is 50%, that is 50. If it's in non-pregnant women, the incidence is 15 to 20%. Hope I've cleared to all of you. Or do you want me to repeat it once again for you before we move ahead?
Ma'am, don't you have slide for these percentages?
No, actually I haven't made this slide deliberately because even from the RCG college, we are not supposed to share. There are some copyright issues that we are not able to share these slides directly by saying that this has come as a question or these are the important things. That is, but definitely I'll write it for you. I can write it in the chat box for you right now. Just will take. I've mentioned it in the chat box so that you all can see it. So now moving ahead from here. So this is the diagnosis and the treatment of malaria in pregnancy, guideline number 54B, which was released in April 2010. So as we all know, malaria is the most important parasitic infection and is the most common tropical disease caused by malaria and a female Anopheles mosquito. The most common and the most dangerous type species is Plasmodium falciparum. And usually it is more common in areas of Africa, at an estimated rate of about 1 in 4 women in sub-Sahara Africa in areas of stable transmission has malaria at the time of the birth as well. So the mortality rate, I'll repeat this point, mortality from uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria is 0.1%. If it's a complicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria, in pregnancy, the mortality is 50%. If the woman is non-pregnant, the mortality is 15 to 20%. Malaria in pregnancy is detrimental to the woman as well as the fetus that we have already discussed. And the very important thing is that malaria is a parasitic infection which is caused by a female Anopheles sporozoid mosquito. We all know that is the female Anopheles mosquito, but which stage of it is the sporozoid that is causing the transmission. So this is the, so you all can see this is the cycle of the malaria cycle that I'll be discussing with you. So first of all, what we can see here, the female Anopheles mosquito has bite a person. Now it is going into the liver cell. The bite is called female Anopheles sporozoite. In the liver, it is going to affect, that is the blood stage that which causes disease. Now it is the time when it goes into the blood, it will manifest itself. So when it goes into the liver cell, it starts to divide and forms from a sporozoite into merozoites. And when it turns into merozoite, it starts to consume the hemoglobin from the body, that is the red blood cell. It starts to affect the red blood cells, and resulting it affects their cell membrane. Membranes is affected, that is why they are released. Only one was there, now it has duplicated itself, and now finally it has damaged the cell membrane of the red blood cell, and it has started to release from there. Now once it is released, these small red blood cells, they get stick with the small blood vessels in the brain and as well as in the kidney. These are the most common organs that are affected because of this. And now the gametes have started to form. Hope I'm clear. I would just repeat this cycle. We need to understand only the human phase of the cycle that is happening in the human. First of all, any person who, especially a female lady who has been bite by the female sporozoite form of the mosquito. It goes into the liver. In the liver, it divides itself, and then from the one.
हेलो, ये मेरी टूटी चल रही है. टूटी को तार पकड़ के खींचा करो, उस तरह ये सही हो जाता है. अगर ना चल तो.
Can we mute everyone, please?
निकालो तार से.
Are we able? Is it possible to mute all of them? Please?
मुनीम, मेरी बात सुनिए, आपकी आवाज जा रही थी. आपकी आवाज जा रही थी. और वो बेचारी चीखती रही है पीछे से, और अब मैंने सबको म्यूट कर दिया तो वो भी म्यूट हो गई है.
Okay, so I'll repeat just a quick revision of the cycle in the malaria cycle that we need to know the cycle in the human. So first of all, a female mosquito, that is the female Anopheles sporozoite phase of the mosquito, has bite a woman, and now it goes, these cells, the sporozoites, they enter into the liver. Once they enter into the liver, the disease phase starts. Now from the liver, they convert from sporozoites into merozoites, and then they enter into the red blood cells and start to duplicate themselves, and they damage the membranes of the red blood cell, and these red blood cells, then they move into the blood everywhere throughout the body, basically and majorly affecting the organs, that is the brain and the kidney. They can affect any organ of the body, but the major organs that are affected are the kidney and the brain. So the hallmark of Plasmodium falciparum malaria in pregnancy, it is the parasites, they sequestered into the placenta. So it is the Plasmodium falciparum is dangerous, is not only because of this, that is cause it's the dangerous, but it is also because that it is sequestering into, that is going into the placenta. However, The sequestration or moving into the placenta is not known to occur with any of the benign malarias that is caused by Plasmodium vivax, OL, or Plasmodium malariae. In pregnancy, what can be the effects that we've already discussed? We will repeat it again. In pregnancy, the adverse effects of malaria infection results from the infection itself, but comparable to the effects of any severe febrile illness. It can cause miscarriages, stillbirth, premature birth for the babies, and for the mother, it can cause cerebral edema, anemia to the mother, and also maternal mortality. And makes her immunity low, so she is more prone to other infections as well. So Plasmodium falciparum causes greater morbidity in terms of maternal and fetal. Principally, it causes low birth weight for the baby, and for the mother, it causes anemia and also mortality than non-Plasmodium falciparum malaria. But there is mounting evidence that Plasmodium vivax is not as benign as it was thought to be. So the most dangerous and the most common is Plasmodium falciparum, and the least common is Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium OL, and malaria. So different people, when they're taking the drugs, they respond differently to the treatment, which is multifactorial, but it is associated with the degree of immunity they have previously been having from the repeated exposures in childhood and the background level to the drug resistance. The higher the transmission of malaria, the greater the degree of prior immunity, and the more likely the woman will respond favorably to a drug treatment. So now there are a few definitions that we need to be defining. Now, how do we explain when we say that the malaria is severe and complicated? The severe signs of malaria, they are non-specific, and the other causes must be excluded before assigning that the signs and symptoms to the malaria. The parasitemia of severe malaria, it can be less than 2%, but pregnant women with 2% or more parasited red blood cells, they are at high risk of developing severe malaria, and they should be treated with severe malaria protocol. So if a woman has severe malaria, the signs and the symptoms are not specific, but usually they are having 2% or more than 2% of the parasitic red blood cells. If the woman is having uncomplicated malaria, so she will be having fewer than 2% of the parasite red blood cells. Along with that, no signs of severity and no any complicating features will be there. So if it is less than 2, uncomplicated. If it is 2 or more than 2, then it is going to be severe uncomplicated malaria. Now, how do we explain congenital malaria? Congenital malaria can occur in the newborns and even in the young infant. It results from the passage of parasites or the infected red blood cells from the mother to the newborn in utero or during delivery, and not by the bite of the female Anopheles mosquito. This is very important point that we should that I'm going to repeat it. It can happen in the newborn or the young infant because of the parasite or the infected red blood cell is the causative agent, not the bite of the female Anopheles mosquito for the newborns or the young infant. Hope I've cleared this point to all of you.
Ma'am, could you please repeat the when to call it severe and when not to call it severe or complicated?
Okay, severe and complicated. If it is if the number of red blood cells that are affected are less than 2% with no any signs of severity and there's no any complicating features, then we call it as uncomplicated. Less than 2% is uncomplicated. If it is 2% or more than 2%, it is complicated and severe as well.
Okay. But what are the signs that we need to consider apart from the parasitemia?
Yeah, that I'm going to tell you in the next slide.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So as you wanted to know, so as you wanted to know, so I'm telling you these are the signs and symptoms of malaria. In terms of symptoms, you can have fever, chills and sweat. We all know this. Headache, muscle pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cough, and the general malaise. And what we need to see as the clinician, we need to see We need to measure her temperature. We need to see any jaundice, anemia, splenomegaly, and if she is having any element of respiratory distress. So these are the signs and symptoms that we need to see that are present in a patient with malaria. Now, if it is a severe malaria, so what can be the findings that we need to know? It can be the woman can have impaired consciousness. She could be in distress. That is, she is having acute respiratory distress syndrome, pulmonary edema. That is, she is having difficulty in breathing. She can have multiple convulsions. And sometimes the woman can also present in shock where her blood pressure is less than 90 to 60 millimeters of mercury. And she can also land up in DIC, that is disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. And sometimes there can be hemoglobinuria without G6PD deficiency. So these are the findings. These are the clinical manifestations that we need to see a woman with severe or complicated malaria. So now we have diagnosed a case that she is a case of, by knowing her signs and symptoms, we've identified that she's a lady who is having malaria in pregnancy. Now we need to go for the investigation. So in terms of investigations, what are we going to find? What will be the findings? That we're anemia. That is, usually we expect the hemoglobin to be less than 8 grams per deciliter. Along with that, there can be thrombocytopenia, hypoglycemia. That is, the glucose level will be less than 2.2 millimole. Sometimes there can be element of acidosis, that is the pH is less than 7.3, oliguria, that is less than 0.4 ml of urine output, or the creatinine level is high, that is more than 265 micromole per liter. Sometimes the level of lactate can be high, which tells about the relation with the mortality. If it is hyperparasitemia, that is more than 2% of the parasite red blood cells, indicating that it is a severe and a complicated malaria. And there's a type of malaria that we call as algid malaria that is caused with the gram-negative organisms. But the guideline does not define anything in detail about it. Just this only single point has been mentioned. And to exclude meningitis, because it can be one of the differential diagnoses with fever. So for that, we need to do lumbar puncture to exclude meningitis. Now, why is malaria very difficult to diagnose? Because sometimes there are no specific signs and symptoms of malaria infection, and it can present with a simple flu-like illness. Sometimes, if a woman is traveling, a history of travel to a malaria endemic area should be sought in a pregnant woman with pyrexia of unknown origin. If we're having a suspicious of malaria, so we need to confirm it. For confirmation, we are going to do malarial blood film. So the gold standard or the confirmatory test for malaria is blood films, which are going to be thick and the thin films. The confirmatory and the gold standard test for diagnosis of malaria are the blood films, thick and the thin slides. Okay. And sometimes there can be misdiagnosis, has also been reported to occur when the leading symptoms are jaundice or respiratory and possibly GIT symptoms, especially in children. So misdiagnosis and the delay of the treatment are the most common reasons for death from malaria in European countries. For the non-falciparum malaria, the history of travel may be more than 1 year before the onset of symptoms, and for any woman who has taken the prophylaxis, compliance does not rule out the diagnosis of malaria. So it is very important for us, once we are suspecting a woman with malaria, after we are having a suspicion from our signs and symptoms, then we need to do certain investigations that we have just discussed in form of full blood count to know her hemoglobin, which is usually less than 8 grams per deciliter. Thrombocytopenia, RBS will be low, that is hypoglycemia. And if we measure her kidney function test, then creatinine can be on the high, creatinine may be on the high side, that is more than 265 micromole per liter. And along with that, there can be lactic acidosis as well. So, but to confirm, And then after doing that, we need to confirm our diagnosis. For the confirmation, again, I'm repeating this point, the gold standard and the confirmatory test for malaria is blood film in the form of thick and the thin slides.
Excuse me, Dr. Aksar.
Yes, please.
I want to ask, you said to differentiate between the complicated and non-complicated malaria. You have told us about that percentage of the parasitized blood, or that RBCs. Then what
Yes.
is the test for that? Means how do we know, okay, this much percentage of parasitized bloods are there? So what is the test for that?
That is basically not our job. These are the rapid diagnostic tests that are performed by the microbiologist. We are just going to take the sample and hand it over to them. Now it's their duty. They will do the test, the microscopy for us, that is the blood thicken, and the rapid diagnostic test to quantify the number of infected red blood cells.
Okay.
First of all, we do the blood thick and thin films, and then we need to, if it is confirmed that she has malaria, diagnosed on the blood thick and thin films, then we are going to do this rapid diagnostic test, which will quantify the number of infected blood cells. That is more than or less than 2%.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. So how should malaria in pregnancy be diagnosed? Yeah, I've just told you this point. The diagnosis of malaria in pregnancy and in non-pregnancy relies on the microscopic examination. That is the current gold standard of the thick and the thin blood films. And to detect the number of RBCs that are being infected, that is the parasitemia, we are going to do the rapid diagnostic test. After we have confirmed that after confirming from the thick and the thin films. The most important point is that the rapid diagnostic test should not replace the blood films, which should always be prepared, even if they cannot be immediately be read. So always the gold standard will be the blood thick and thin films, and then after that rapid diagnostic test will be done. Now if your patient is febrile, in a febrile patient, 3 negative malaria smears 12 to 24 hours apart rules out the diagnosis of malaria. So if there are 3 negative
Can you please repeat the previous slide, that rapid test?
Okay, I'll repeat it. To diagnose malaria, the gold standard and the confirmatory test is the blood microscopy, that is the thick and the thin films. Once you have confirmed on the thick and the thin slides that malaria is confirmed, now we need to know whether it is a complicated malaria or an uncomplicated malaria, because the treatment is different for both of them. That is why we need to rule out or identify whether it is complicated or uncomplicated. For that, we are going to do rapid diagnostic test, which will tell us about the quantification of the infected red blood cells.
But ma'am, here it is written or, okay, whether to do the thick and thin films or the use of the rapid diagnostic. Okay, we can do either of them, these tests.
No, yes, we can do either of them, but read ahead of it, rapid diagnostic tests, they are less sensitive than malaria blood film. A positive rapid diagnostic test should be followed by microscopy to quantify the number of infected red blood cells and to confirm the species and the stage. But in more ahead of it, I've written also the rapid diagnostic test should not replace the blood films, which should always be prepared, even if they cannot immediately be read. Okay, so if you get an SPA or an EMQ in which we need to mark the gold standard or the confirmatory test for malaria, it is the thick and the thin films followed by rapid diagnostic test, which will tell us the number of the infected, quantification of the infected blood cells and the species of the malaria.
Why should you do a rapid diagnostic test after blood film? From the blood film itself, you will be knowing which type of malaria it is.
Yeah, who is this with us?
Sapna.
Yeah, Sapna, your question is really very valid, and I can see that you're really very active as well. Yes, We need to know because we need to find out whether it is a complicated malaria or an uncomplicated malaria, because the treatment for both of them is different. That's the reason that we need to do it. Okay.
Yeah, but then we can identify that with the blood film itself. Then why should you do rapid diagnostic test after the blood film?
No, how would we know the number? How would we quantify them? How would we know the number of the infected blood cells from the blood film? We can know the species, we can know the type, but we cannot know the how many red blood cells are affected.
But ma'am, rapid diagnosis.
PT usually you get whether it is positive or not, isn't it?
Sorry?
I'm not sure. Okay, I thought it was a rapid diagnostic test was whether it is positive or not. That's all the result that you get.
No,
I'm also confused about this, ma'am, because I think the rapid test is just for the diagnosis. It's not for the quantification, I guess.
No. Rapid diagnostic test. A rapid diagnostic test. I'll tell you.
Ma'am, in this paragraph, in this third paragraph.
As the paragraph shows that it's quantify the number of infected cells. If you can quantify, so it will help to decide either it's severe or unsevere, because if the percentage is more than 2%, so it means severe, so the treatment will be different. And second, it confirm the species, either it's falciparum, malaria, and which one, so the treatment again change. And third, it will help to identify the stage of parasite, so the treatment will again change. So it means it is helpful.
Here it is written positive RTT should be followed by microscopy, isn't it? That means followed by blood films.
No, first of all, we need to do microscopy. The sequence of the test, first of all, what we are going to do, we are going to do the microscopy in the form of blood thick and thin films. Then followed by, if they are positive, if it is showing that she has malaria, then we are going to do how many number of infected red blood cells are there. Then we need to, before, if we are doing it before, then there is no use of doing it. Then the red blood cells can be infected because of any other condition. Because of any other infection, they can also be affected. Or if she's having any other blood disorder, they can also be affected because of that. But once we are sure that she has, sorry, if we are sure that she is having a confirmatory test, that is microscopy, confirms us that she is having infection of malaria, Plasmodium malaria, then we are going to do the rapid diagnostic test to confirm the number of the infected red blood cells, that is parasitemia, which will tell us whether it is complicated or uncomplicated malaria. And also it will tell us the species and the stage of the parasites. Because it is very important for us to know, because the management is different, the treatment is different for each of them. Complicated, uncomplicated malaria, the treatment is different. That is why it is very important for us to know. Hope I have cleared you, Sapna. Or would you like me to ask anything else?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. So is the severity of malaria a useful aid in managing the infection? So women with malaria and in pregnancy should have the severity of their condition assessed, and it should be documented because it will help us in the management. So the clinical condition is the most important indicator of the severity, and it should be assessed promptly. The severity of malaria determines the treatment and predicts the case and the fatality rate as well. So the severity of malaria is determined by its treatment. That is why in uncomplicated malaria, the fatality rates or the mortality rates are low, that is 0.1% for Plasmodium falciparum. And if she is pregnant, then the rates are higher, that is 50% in pregnancy. If not pregnant, the rates are lower, that is 15 to 20%. The mortality is 2 to 10 times higher in pregnant women than in non-pregnant women in endemic areas. Definitely, it is higher. 15 to 20 compared to 50 is higher. The non-falciparum species are rarely fatal, but cautious should still be observed. Once the disease has been classified as severe or complicated or uncomplicated malaria, prompt treatment should be instituted. Once we have diagnosis, treatment should be started. If it is an uncomplicated malaria, we need to admit her in hospital. If it is a complicated and severe malaria, then also we need to admit her in ICU. A very differentiating point. If it's an uncomplicated malaria, she will only be admitted in the hospital. But then further, if her condition deteriorates or she is not improving, then we may need to transfer her to the ICU. But if it is a complicated malaria, along with that, it is a severe malaria. So she will be admitted directly into the ICU. Okay. So how's malaria infection treated during pregnancy? Treating malaria in pregnancy is an emergency. Admitting pregnant women with an uncomplicated malaria to the hospital and pregnant women with severe uncomplicated malaria to the intensive care unit. And the first line treatment of choice for Plasmodium falciparum is IV artesunate. If it is not available, then the second line would be IV quinine. Okay. Use of quinine and clindamycin to treat uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum or mix such as Plasmodium falciparum and Vivex can be treated. But chloroquine to treat Vivex, oval or Plasmodium malaria can be used. But primaquine, it should not be used in pregnancy. So the ideal drug of choice, if she is having Plasmodium falciparum, the ideal choice is artesunate. If artesunate is not available, then the next choice is IV quinine. But if it is Vivex, OL or Plasmodium malaria, so the drug will be chloroquine. And we always need to take, it's a multidisciplinary approach. So definitely the infectious disease team will be with us, with obstetrician being P. And do not persist with oral therapy. If woman is having vomiting, so the oral therapy is not the choice for her, then IV line should be the treatment for her. For fever, we are going to give her antipyretics that we've just repeated. And also along with, if a woman is having malaria, because the RBCs are affected, she will be having anemia. She can develop anemia. So for that, we need to do her full blood count to find out anemia, how much the anemia is, and then we need to treat it appropriately. And once we are treating her, everything should be mentioned in her note or the file she is having, the follow-up period, what is the type of the malaria, what is the species of the malaria, all should be documented in our notes. Now, if we delay the treatment, sometimes it can also result in mortality for the mother. So treatment, emergency treatment is very important to be treated. If it is a severe or complicated malaria, so with any species, so the drug of choice will be, if she cannot tolerate oral, then we can give her IM. But with IM, we need to give with her the clindamycin as well. This is more than enough to be remembered, nothing else. If there's any species artesunate or oral or IM is not tolerated, or we don't have clindamycin available, then the next alternative choice will be quinine in the form of IV. So this is the reason that we should know whether it is a severe or complicated malaria and the degree of parasitemia, that we are diagnosing it by rapid diagnostic test. If it's an uncomplicated malaria caused by Plasmodium falciparum, then oral quinine can be given to her along with clindamycin. But if she is vomiting, then along with, again, quinine can be given to her in the form of IV. If it's a non-falciparum malaria, that is Vivex, oval or malaria, then chloroquine is the drug of choice. But if she is resistant to Plasmodium vivex or the relapse is happening during pregnancy, to prevent the relapse, we can also give chloroquine. To prevent relapse during pregnancy, chloroquine is a drug. And preventing relapse after delivery, it should be postponed till 3 months after delivery, and G6PD testing should be done because it causes hemolysis in the baby. And if chloroquine is not available, then the other drug is primaquine for Plasmodium ovale, Plasmodium vivax. Okay, so I'll just be repeating the drugs for you to make it simplified and easier for you. If the choice of drug for severe falciparum malaria in pregnancy is IV artesunate. If it is not available or is not available for any reason, then the second line will be IV quinine. If it is if we are having Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale, or Plasmodium malariae, then the drug will be chloroquine. However, also I would like to tell you the drug we have discussed before this as well. The drug primaquine is not suitable in pregnancy because it causes hemolysis if a patient is having G6PD deficiency. And once a patient is in shock or she is collapsed already because of malaria, so we don't know her history. And if we give her primaquine, definitely there will be hemolysis and we will land up in a very disastrous condition. So that is the reason that this primaquine is avoided in pregnancy. And if a woman is having vomiting, oral therapy cannot, if she's not able to tolerate oral therapy, then IV will be the choice of treatment for her. Now, who should write the treatment? The treatment will be written. The treatment prescription is limited to the physicians, and treatment in pregnancy, particularly of the severe and the recurrent malaria, is given by the expert advice. Where should treatment of uncomplicated malaria should be take place in the UK? If it's an uncomplicated malaria, patient should be admitted to the hospital. If it's a complicated and severe malaria, the patient should be admitted to the hospital in the intensive care unit. This is the difference basically. So in the UK, it is advisable to hospitalize all pregnant women with Plasmodium falciparum as the clinical condition can deteriorate rapidly. Blood films, they are usually monitored every 24 hours, but clinical deterioration is not an indication for repeated blood film. Okay. If a condition is deteriorating, we can repeat every 24 hours the blood films for her. So now moving. Yeah. So what happens if a patient is vomiting? The choice is either we can give her in the form of IV, or sometimes what happens if we are giving her quinine, the adverse effect, the side effect of quinine is vomiting. The side effect of the drug quinine is vomiting. So sometimes it can be associated that the treatment is not working, that is the anti-malaria treatment is failure. So if that is the case, then we can use an antiemetic, and the safest antiemetic so the first line safest is always cyclazine, procyclazine that we have already discussed. If not, metoclopramide as being the second line drug can also be given in pregnancy. And if it's an what other medication should be provided alongside treatment of an uncomplicated malaria infection? Because it is very important to treat malaria because it is associated with premature labor and fetal distress. Prompt treatment with antipyretics, that is paracetamol, is given at a dose that is for individual can be given to the patient. And evidence for the efficacy of paracetamol arises mainly from the studies in the children. So it is safe in pregnancy as well. The most commonly drug that we are using in pregnancy as well, antipyretics. Now, does pregnancy affect the efficacy of malaria treatment? Yes, it does. Treatment in pregnancy may have a lower efficacy than in non-pregnant patients, but this apparent effect could result from lower concentrations of anti-malaria in pregnancy. So women should be advised that there's a chance of recurrence. So follow-up plan should be planned for this lady if she is having malaria in pregnancy. Especially with the falciparum, because it causes sequestration, it enters into the placenta. That is why we need to, this is a very hallmark sign of Plasmodium falciparum. It is dangerous because it is sequestering into the placenta. So for that, polymerase chain reaction confirmed prolonged submicroscopic carriage with subsequent recurrence has been reported in women following the drug treatment for uncomplicated. And usually the recurrence is around for 28 to 42 days for Plasmodium falciparum. For all the drugs, for all the species, the recurrence rate is mentioned. Recurrence number of days are mentioned, but the most common that we should remember is for Plasmodium falciparum, that is 28 to 42 days. From 28 to 42 days. Now, if it is a recurrent infection that is recurring following treatment, they're less sensitive to drugs which are used against them. If quinine and clindamycin has been failed as a first-line treatment, then alternative should be there. So what is the alternative? That is atovaquone, proguanil, artesunate, and dihydroarteminate. Piperacin has been used in pregnant women when there are multiple recurrent infections. So what does the WHO say? The WHO gives us the recommended regimen if there's a recurrence of malaria in pregnancy. That is, we are going to give the treatment for 7 days, which will include artesunate 2 mg per kg per day or 100 mg tablet daily for 7 days. Along with that, clindamycin has to be given. So you don't need to remember the dose. Only you need to remember if there is recurrence, WHO has given us the drug of treatment, that is artesunate and clindamycin, which can be used in recurrence in pregnancy. Now, as there can be pregnancy-related complications of severe malaria in pregnancy, how should we need to monitor them or manage them? So, if there is hypoglycemia regularly, as it can be profound and occur is cause of persistent malaria in pregnancy, which can also be exacerbated by the treatment quinine. So, there's a very important point for the quinine. There are two most common side effects, that it causes hypoglycemia and vomiting. And to prevent mortality from pulmonary edema and acute respiratory distress syndrome, we need to assess her by measuring her JVP or CVP pressure, central venous pressure. Our aim should be to keep the pressure at right arterial pressure of less than 10 centimeter of water. Women who are severely anemic, they should be transfused slowly under the cover with packed red blood cells, packed cells, and along with that under the cover of IV Lasix, that is 20 mg. Alternatively, exchange transfusion can be given to the woman. And sometimes along with the malaria, there can be because the immunity of the patient is low, there can be secondary bacterial infection that can be associated. So it should be suspected if the patient is becoming hypotensive. We can suspect that as well. So hypoglycemia is commonly asymptomatic, although it may be associated with, on the CTG, it will show symptoms of fetal bradycardia along with the signs of fetal distress for the baby. And whenever we have always been studying that if the woman is most severely ill woman, it is associated with lactic acidosis and high mortality. And in patients who have been given quinine, abnormal behavior, sweating, and sudden loss of consciousness, they are the usual manifestations that can happen. Okay. Quinine, as it causes hypoglycemia, how is it caused? It is telling us the guideline. It is caused by the hyperinsulinemia, and it remains the most common and the most important adverse effect of this drug. So for quinine, I'll repeat the side effects or the adverse effects: hypoglycemia and vomiting. So the hypoglycemia, it may be profound to such an extent that regular monitoring of glucose is required while undergoing the quinine treatment. And sometimes it can also present late in the disease when the patient appears to be recovering. So quinine at treatment dose does not induce abortion or labor. All right. Now, along with this, if the patient she is having complications, so how should we deal with the complications that are occurring with that? So if she's having cerebral malaria, which is or in the form she is manifesting in the form of coma, so we should monitor her by using Glasgow Coma Scale. We should monitor her airway, breathing, and circulation, that is ABC. that we usually do when a woman is in shock or she's in coma, or if she is not, if there's if there's any emergency situation, we always go for start from a ABC. And if there's hyperpyrexia, that is, we can do antipyretics along with that sponging and fanning. If there are convulsions, airway to prevent to prevent tongue bite, and it should be treated promptly with IV or rectal diazepam. Okay, and hypoglycemia, for hypoglycemia, we will be checking her blood glucose regularly and will be correcting hypoglycemia, because sometimes quinine is a drug which can also cause hypoglycemia. If there is anemia, the treatment of anemia is transfusion with packed red blood cells. If there is pulmonary edema because of the acute ARDS, that is, so we are going to measure her JBP or CBP line, and our aim will be to keep the blood to keep the arterial blood pressure less than 10 centimeter of water. So how would we do that? We will give her oxygen, prop her up to 545 degrees. We'll stop giving her overfluid IV overfluid, be avoided in that cases. And we will need the help from our anesthetist also. That is the multidisciplinary team approach. And there can be renal, there are chances of having renal failure. So for that also we need to give, we need to ensure that the fluid overload is not there. And sometimes there can be, if there is any bleeding or coagulopathy, then we can give her fresh whole blood. But if it is anemia, then we are going to give her packed red blood cells. Okay. And if there is metabolic acidosis, we need to do careful fluid balance, observation of her JAP or CVP, which will help us to optimize the fluid balance and avoid overfilling. We are going, acidosis could either be because of hypoglycemia, hypovolemia, and septicemia as well. If severe, hemodialysis or hemofiltration can be done. If there is shock, then we are going to suspect her as a case of septicemia. We'll take her cultures. We will give her antibiotics, bottom spectrum antibiotics after taking the blood culture. And antibiotics are usually given within 1 hour of septicemia after taking the cultures. Now, the common reason for the malaria, the reason that is causing mortality in 50% of the cases is pulmonary edema. And for pulmonary edema, the most common sign that we can see is the increase in the respiratory rate. Along with that, then there can be all the chest findings can be there. But the first sign that we are going to see is the respiratory rate that we are going to see. Ensure that pulmonary edema has not resulted from iatrogenic fluid overload, and monitor the CVP pressure and the urine output. In some women, ARDS can occur in addition to the pulmonary edema. Once the syndrome develops, the patient needs fluid resuscitation. Severe anemia. Why is it important for us to treat anemia in pregnancy? If it is because of this malaria, because it can cause maternal morbidity, causing increased risk of PPH, and along with that, perinatal mortality. And if she is in pregnancy, she can go into, if she is in labor, she can go into severe anemia. There can be fluid overload resulting into pulmonary edema. So that is why it is very important to treat anemia of malaria in pregnancy. Already discussed this, but I'll be repeating it with you. So obstetric management, that is specific to the malaria infection in pregnancy, preterm labor, fetal growth restriction, and fetal heart rate abnormalities. That is in terms of the baby is going to have fetal distress, fetal bradycardia, and type 2 decelerations are commonly seen on the CTG if the baby is in distress, which can occur in patients with malaria in pregnancy. In severe malaria complicated by fetal compromise, a multidisciplinary team approach will be taken. That will include the ICU specialist, infectious disease specialist, the obstetrician, and the neonatologist also, who will decide to plan the optimal management of the mother and the baby. And stillbirth and premature delivery in malaria in pregnancy are best prevented with prompt and effective anti-malarial treatment. If it is an uncomplicated malaria in pregnancy, is not a reason for indication of induction of labor. thromboprophylaxis should be weighed up against the risk of hemorrhage, and it should be withheld if the platelet count is falling or is less than 100, indicating thrombocytopenia. So for thromboprophylaxis, we need to assess the woman. If her platelet count is falling, then we cannot give it to her because there can be two things at the same time. She is having anemia, which will make her more prone to having PPH. And also the platelet count is falling, then we cannot give her thromboprophylaxis. We need to weigh the risk and the benefits for the lady at that, depending on the individualized patient, that has to be done. If it's a peripartum malaria, is an indication that the placenta should be sent for histopathology, and along with the placenta, cord and the baby blood films to detect the congenital in malaria at an early stage. So inform women of the risk of vertical transmission, and in the presence of positive placental blood films, that fever in the infant could indicate malaria. So a blood film for the baby is required for confirmation. Okay. So in order to confirm for the baby also, we are going to do the blood film for the baby as well as for the mother. The investigation is same for both of them. So if it is a severe malaria, so what are the findings that we can see on the CTG? We can reveal fetal tachycardia. Sometimes it could be bradycardia, either of them. Along with that, there can be decelerations in relation to the uterine contractions, which will be indicating that the baby is in fetal distress. Usually it happens because of the fever. So for fever, the treatment is paracetamol that we have to give 1 gram every 4 to 6 hours, which is safe in pregnancy. Sometimes the hypoglycemia, maternal hypoglycemia, should also be excluded as a cause of fetal distress, particularly if the treatment is with quinine, because quinine causes hypoglycemia, which can cause fetal distress in the baby. So we should exclude that as well. And tocolytic therapy and prophylactic steroid therapy are the usual obstetric doses that should be considered if there are any no contraindication. So there is no extra dose for any tocolysis or steroids for a patient with malaria in pregnancy. Just a repeat of the slide. Inform women of the risk of the vertical transmission, and in the presence of positive placental blood films, that fever in the baby could indicate malaria. So for that, a blood film for the baby is required to confirm.
Second common cause, PPH during delivery.
Ideally, PPH is the first most common cause according to the embrace. But if it is malaria in pregnancy, for that the reason for mortality is pulmonary edema. For malaria, it's pulmonary edema. For general, PPH is one of the most common cause of mortality during at the time of delivery.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So would you like me to continue ahead, move ahead?
Please continue.
Move ahead. Continue.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, madam, I have one question.
Or you can take a break for 5 minutes. Ajay, what is the next topic? Is it cytomegalo or it is a corona?
It is cytomegalovirus.
But today it was supposed to be corona. We all read corona.
So that's good. You are preparing earlier in. Definitely, coronavirus is we are going to discuss. It's a very hot topic nowadays.
Yeah, but today's topic was corona and malaria. So we thought maybe the
Yeah, but unfortunately, because of my work situation, I was not able to cover that topic. So
okay.
I tried to cover the cytomegalovirus. Sorry
no
for
problem,
that.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you. No problem.
You're welcome. So is there any question or should we move ahead?
Yeah, madam, I have one question. Madam, in case of, like we talk about the placenta, that we have to go for the histopathology of placenta. So should we do this histopathology in case of both complicated and uncomplicated malaria, or it will be helpful only in case of complicated malaria? Is there any protocol or?
No, there's no protocol as such defined for that. That it should be done in what type.
Okay, so in perspective of fetus, then it will be helpful. Like if you go for histopathology and there is positive findings, so it gonna help to treat
Yeah,
the
with
baby.
that, yeah, treat the baby. Yes, absolutely, very right.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Thank you.
But it was only for the falciparum, I guess, but not for every type of malaria.
Because Plasmodium falciparum is the most dangerous one, and it enters
Yeah.
into the placenta. That is why.
Yeah,
Because
so
the hallmark sign of Plasmodium falciparum is its sequestration into the placenta. That is why.
so it means it is indicated only for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Okay. You're welcome, Jeff.